の方たちが、はい、皆さんお願いします。
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the event, The Power of Youth from Hiroshima on this special day. We are coming to you today from Hiroshima on the 77th August 6th Memorial Day of atomic bombing. I am Shizuka Kuramitsu. I'm currently working as a UNITAR intern. I'm going to be the moderator for today, along with Wataru Nakajima, a former UNITAR youth ambassador. Before we begin, I would like to welcome each and every one of you and extend my deepest gratitude to the United Nations and Hiroshima Prefecture for providing the youth with such extraordinary chance to have our voices heard. Lately, the youth have more chances to speak with global leaders, to exchange their ideas. And I am really excited about it because it shows that more and more people are being aware of the significance of bringing diversity onto discussion tables. And I strongly believe that this will lead to a better and sustainable future for all. I also cannot begin to express my thanks to global leaders, youth, and citizens for listening to the message through live streaming. Now, let me turn to the panelists for today. We have 5 young activists based in Japan, and I am incredibly honored to introduce the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. António Guterres. The Secretary General has been in his current role since 2017. Mr. Guterres has a long career in the both UN system and public service, committing to human dignity for all. We are thrilled that he is with us today, so please join me in welcoming the State Secretary General of the United Nations for the opening remarks. Please.
First of all, it's an enormous pleasure to be with all of you today. It's a very symbolic day. It's my second visit to Hiroshima. It's the first time I participate in the ceremony in which we remember the horrible, the atrocious situation that was the atomic bomb that was thrown here and had the horrible impacts that you are all fully aware. And this brings me to one essential message. I would like to apologize on behalf of my generation for the state of the world we are leaving to your generation. And this creates an enormous responsibility to your generation. And there is a generation in between, which our governor represents, that I hope will help make the shift. But my generation was unable, first of all, to get the world rid of nuclear weapons. My generation is, until now, unable to effectively address the climate change threats. We all know that we should limit the temperature growth to 1.5 degrees, because if not, the consequences will be even more devastating that we are seeing now. For that, we need to have carbon neutrality in 2050 and a meaningful reduction of emissions, 45% in 2030 in relation to 2010. Emissions are growing, and based on the commitments made by governments all over the world, in 2030, instead of a reduction of 45%, we will have an increase of 14%. I hope that many things will be corrected in between, but the truth is that my generation was not able to understand on time that we were leading the planet to a collective suicide. And we were stupid enough to wage a war against nature at a scale in which nature is striking back in terrible ways. On the other hand, we'll be giving you a world with enormous inequalities. Inequalities among countries and inequalities within countries. Yesterday I appealed for a tax on the excessive, I even said grotesque profits that oil and gas companies are making today based on the suffering of people in the war in Ukraine and based on the suffering of people that is seeing their household budgets put into question by rising prices. Of course, Japan is a special country. It's difficult to make prices rise in Japan, but the truth is that in a country like mine, we have an inflation rate today of 9 or 10%, and the salaries are growing 1 or 2%. So people are really in difficulties. At the same time, you have the richest people in the world with their wealth increasing exponentially, and the middle class is suffering, north and south. And then the developing countries are now in a dramatic situation because vaccines were not well distributed, and then because the resources available for recovery are very different in countries like Japan or the European Union or the United States or African countries or Latin American countries. On top of that, the impact of the war in Ukraine has again increased the pressure of the developing countries, in which we have many on the verge of collapse of their financial systems, debt defaults. We have governments without margin of maneuver to help their population with the rising prices. And so the global south that was recovering in relation to the huge gap to the developed world, now things have been, again, the gap is enlarging, and the richer are resisting much better to all these crises than the poor countries. And then inside countries, we see that the inequalities are also growing enormously. And inequality is terrible because it creates frustration, it creates hunger, and we see instability, and in many situations we see conflict. So we are also living a world in conflict. We have a multiplication of new wars, and wars that are becoming more and more complicated because there are many actors. I mean, you look at Libya, you have, in Libya you have, I don't know how many militias. You have the army of General Haftar and the army of Tripoli. And then you have the Wagner group from the Russians, and you have militias from Chad and from Sudan. You have the Turkish presence. You have Syrian militias on both sides. I mean, so wars became much more difficult to solve and much more dramatic in the impacts on populations because they tend to last and last and last. So we have largely failed. And the central question I would like to leave to you is the combination of these three things. The nuclear risk, which is a risk of destruction of the planet, the climate risk, which is a risk of destruction of the planet, and the enormous increase of inequalities that is distracting the social cohesion of our societies. Now, these three risks need a response based on two concepts, inclusivity and sustainability. We need to fight now, because we are at risk now, and we need to fight now in relation to climate action. You have in Japan things to discuss with the political powers about the role of coal. I think there was a big important decision not to build more coal power plants and not to finance coal with public money outside. But there is a huge amount of private Japanese money funding coal outside the country. And I mean, a number of other aspects that you can discuss in your society. But you can also discuss globally, because we need to make sure that emerging economies like China, India, Indonesia have also the capacity, but also the determination to reduce their emissions. And we need to make sure that we support those countries that are the main victims, that suffer more with the rising level of the oceans, with the droughts, with the storms, and many of them have no resources. So it's the so-called adaptation. So a lot can still be done now, but the next 2 decades will be decisive, and your generation will be assuming responsibilities in the next 2 decades. Sustainability in relation to climate. Fight for disarmament. There are no reason for 13,000 nuclear weapons in the world. Fight for disarmament. Non-proliferation is very important, but disarmament is equally very important. Disarmament in relation to nuclear weapons, but also disarmament in relation to, conventional weapons that are being used to destroy cities, and we are seeing that every day. And the new technologies, these new, the risk of these autonomous weapons that might not have any human control and decide by themselves the machine who to kill and where to kill. So disarmament is very important in all 3 fronts, to save humanity, to save people, and to safeguard future generations, your generation. And at the same time, to fight for more equality, for societies with more cohesion, respecting diversity, making diversity a richness, not a threat, and at the same time, creating the conditions for social cohesion to be maintained as the basis for solid development. So there is a battle now, and there our 2 generations need to work together, or at least those that in my generation have understood that they have failed and want to change course. And then you will assume the responsibilities, and you need to be prepared. It will be tough. The world will be not in a very good shape, but you'll have also fantastic opportunities. Technologies are developing excellent opportunities. Today, my grandfather was born in 1875. There was not even electricity, can you imagine? And there was no radio, no television, no telephones, no nothing. No, it was my grandfather. It was not someone that, no, my grandfather lived like that. Can you imagine the potential of the technologies that are now emerging? The risks, but also the enormous potential. So there is a chance that your generation will be able to have weapons that do not exist now, and to make sure that you guarantee sustainability and inclusivity. A world without nuclear weapons, a world where climate change is controlled, and a world where social cohesion prevails over inequality. I apologize, but I encourage you to assume responsibilities, not to wait, and to speak loudly, because my generation sometimes has a problem of deafness. I even have these small devices here. But this is a physical deafness. There is a deafness that is worse than this, which is those that do not want to listen. So you need to shout at them to make sure they listen.
Well, thank you very much for opening remarks. He has fascinated me since the organization of this event that the Secretary General is visiting Hiroshima August 6th, which is a special day for us. I'm Wataru Nakajima, undergraduate at Akita International University. Even though I live far away from my hometown at present, I am very honored to be back in Hiroshima and engaged in this activity. Like I mentioned before, August 6th is a special day for Hiroshima citizens to rethink what happened in 1945, and also to think about current nuclear weapon issue status. It is also the day for us to pray for peace and strive for nuclear disarmament. But unfortunately, due to the dispute between Russia and Ukraine, the risk of using nuclear weapon is rising significantly. On the other hand, this year's August 6th is remarkable since the NPT Review Conference started in August 1st, and many countries are discussing for guidelines for nuclear non-proliferation, disarmament, and peaceful use of nuclear power. It seems that we have all the right and perfect actors and figures present: global leaders, passionate youth activists, and our audiences. The aim of this session is for youth to share their innovative ideas, issues, and their opinions with the Secretary General, applying their multilateral perspective through their experiences. The topic will expand beyond the nuclear disarmament, but also education, climate change, diversity, inclusion, and politics. There are two discussion questions for this session. One, what are the challenges in your activity that hampers from nuclear disarmament? Two, what are your desires, wish for the Secretary General and global leaders? So I look forward to hearing your unique ideas and opinions. But before we move on to the topic, we would like to hear a self-introduction for the panelists and your activities of 1.5 minutes and your current views on nuclear weapon issue status. So let's start with Mr. Asano. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here, and I'm honored to be here as a panelist. I'm Hideo Asano, an incoming MS student of Midori Institute of International Studies, and I am currently working as a secretariat, staff of Secretariat at Japan NGO Networks for Nuclear Weapons Abolition, in which we coordinate collective actions of more than 20 Japanese NGOs working toward nuclear disarmament to deliver the voices of civil society. And for example, we have a regular dialogue with the Japanese government to try to make an influence on the nuclear disarmament policies. And concerning current situation of nuclear disarmament, I feel that expanding transnational networks of civil society to support nuclear disarmament and even push each national government is becoming more and more important. So I'm so excited to discuss with you all. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here today. I am Suzuka Nakamura. I am a university student in Tokyo, and I launched No Nukes Tokyo, a place where we can fight for disarmament safely outside of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Currently, we are advocating Japanese politicians to join Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and also we are having testimony sessions of hibakusha stories. The thing I am thinking is that due to the crisis of Ukraine, like the situation, the society is getting much more conscious about the disarmament, and it's so difficult for us to, it's getting much more difficult for us to speak up for the abolition of nuclear weapons. We are all like getting attacked through SNS or the internet or the media. So yes, I would like to talk about this after discussion. Thank you.
My name is Kako Okuno. I go to the university in Tokyo studying the nursing. I was born and raised in Hiroshima, and I have been taught that we need to create the world without any nuclear weapons. But other than that, we need to solve the other issues such as climate change and environment change. And the time-bound climate change seems to be the priority. And in 2019, I started the association and NGO activities and try to get the signature. And when it comes to Hiroshima nuclear weapon issue, is a very serious issue for everybody. And together with Mary, I have been involved in PCV activities, acting as the tour guide for the students. And after 77 years have passed, of course, it is necessary to send a message on nuclear weapons. But together with the gender and climate change, we need to look at the issue from the different angles. We are not able to deliver the voices of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to the global people, and the global needs to take a look at the more broad areas, including the climate change and the gender issue. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kento Suzuki, the president of a nonprofit organization based in Hiroshima called the Personalization Project, which is actually based on the idea that I proposed to you back in 2020, if you happen to remember, during the UN 75 in Hiroshima event. So we, the Personalization Project, aims to create an online platform for global youth with the specific aim of them being able to make friends all over the world in the first place and to be able to personalize and internalize the matters of themselves, as well as those that surround their counterparts in other countries. And we're doing this through conducting sessions weekly for everybody, as well as connecting different schools in Japan, as well as those located in other countries. And we are based on a shared belief that unless individuals are able to personalize and internalize matters, there's no ways for those individuals to, first of all, get interested in those issues, let alone making tangible actions proactively towards resolvement of those issues. And listening to the wonderful speeches made by, for example, you two this morning at the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Ceremony, I was repeatedly reminded of the sheer importance of orchestrating everybody's power and every single activities with the shared goal of nuclear disarmament, and also uniting them with trust those individuals and activities. And so thank you so much for having me, and I'm really looking forward to our fruitful discussion today. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary, and I'm originally from Boston in the United States, but I moved to Hiroshima 6 years ago, where I co-founded a peace education nonprofit called Peace Culture Village with my Japanese and American colleagues. And at PCV, the main topic that we focus on is the sustainability. That was a key word that the Secretary General just used, but the sustainability of Hiroshima's peace movement, and by extension, the global peace movement. The average age of the hibakusha, or atomic bomb survivors, is now 84 years old, and there aren't enough successors to carry on their legacy of peace and disarmament education. So at PCV, we address this challenge in two ways. First, through technology and youth-to-youth mentorship programs steeped in the lessons of Hiroshima, we create opportunities and empower youth to enter the peace and disarmament space. And then second, in order to increase the prospects of those youth's sustainable involvement, we offer them paid work in the peace field. So in the past year, our 60 young leaders have been able to offer peace education programs to over 10,000 people from 45 different countries. And I think that empowering young people to believe in and also sustainably act for the future that they envision is key to bolstering our nuclear abolition movement. And so today I come to our discussion from the lens of peace education and social entrepreneurship and youth organizing. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your journeys, how to fight against nuclear weapons. So now let me turn to the question. What are your challenges that you're currently facing, and how do you overcome those obstacles if you have them?
Okay, can I go first? So the youth is facing a problem that there is no place or community where we can continue these activities as our job, or where we can continue this active studies, because there's no option as a job to continue this, even though it is impossible to continue without the economic basic for our lives. So I guess Mary is already trying to figure out how to go through this problem as a PCB member. I want to ask you about that.
Thank you for the question. So, yeah, I think there's two ways that I can think of. I think, for example, the Personalization Project and Fridays for Future and also No Nukes Tokyo, I believe, are planning to kind of continue their peace activities after graduating in tandem with other full-time and part-time jobs. And that's what I did when I first graduated from university, and I think that can work. I think of Kako, which is an organization here in Hiroshima. One of the representatives, Miho, our friend, she does that. She works a full-time job and also does her peace work. But I also understand completely the frustration that a lot of young people face who really want to dedicate all of their time and energy full-time to doing this work. I've also noticed that there tends to be a lack of business acumen or background when it comes to the social sector. And so I often wonder a lot about how we can take the epic social mission of nonprofits or the disarmament movement and then connect that to the financial sustainability that comes along with business. And for PCV in particular, things really turned around for us, and we were able to work and work with a lot more young people when we added people with that business background to our team. So that's what it's been like in our experience, but we need more help, I think, definitely. And speaking of just the inclusion of young people, this is a big topic, helping them to be sustainably involved, but I think Hideo also does a lot of work around youth inclusion and other types of inclusion in the disarmament space, so I wondered if you had any comments on this topic.
Okay, thank you very much. I totally agree with you too, and in my organization too, financial matter is always a problem. And in terms of the youth inclusion, I think it's really crucial to provide the youth with the opportunity to take part in decision-making processes and allow them to play an active role in each institution. And personally speaking, I was not born in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, and I just started my engagement in this nuclear disarmament activity about 1 year ago. But thanks to my organization, I could enjoy a lot of opportunities to actively engage, such as drafting statements and coordinating public symposium, or even participating in the TPNW Plus meeting. And I think my example, I believe that providing such opportunities of active engagement is really helpful for the youth to be active, and I think that would be empowerment of the youth. Yeah. So yes, this is my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. I think three of you just brought it up. The main big issue is that we have to have more diversity and also inclusiveness. And it doesn't have to be only race and gender. And Mary just brought it up that we need more people from economic sector. And Mr. Asano just brought it up that we need more young people who can make a decision making. And I know leaders and also people organizing current leading organization, they have to take a confidence building, educational building measure for youth to educate youth how they can be a next leader. So what do you think of your challenges, Kako and Kento? Both of you are working from very intersectional approach and working on disarmament, but at the same time working on different fields.
Thank you very much. On my part, I just happen to be born and raised in Hiroshima, so nuclear issues have been very close issues for me. But for people in other countries, or for Japanese people living outside Hiroshima or Nagasaki, nuclear weapons perhaps a distant issue. However, climate warming, it's too hot, or you might be a victim of a certain natural disaster, and this will bring you more interested in environmental problem, or if you are a girl, you may be discriminated against and you might be gender sensitive. There are many entry points in those issues. So we activists need to really understand the connectivity and connection between so many different issues. Then people who are not interested in disarmament may get involved in the nuclear disarmament, and also in various opportunities, we might be able to enhance the movement, including and inviting the participation of people who are interested in other issues other than nuclear weapons.
Go for your message, and I definitely echo what you just said. And I strongly, also experienced the sheer lack of interest, I guess, in nuclear disarmament issues, even within Japan. And I suppose one of the biggest and also kind of overarching challenges that we're facing, that I suppose is kind of hindering us from achieving a world without nuclear weapons, is that even within Japan, at least I feel that there's kind of a growing demand for the Japanese government even to own a nuclear weapon or nuclear weapons, even within the general Japanese public, which is extremely alarming and sad and also ironic, but also kind of understandable given the sheer amount of fear that has been instigated by the sporadic and random attack on Ukraine by Russia recently, and also fear that our country could also be attacked if we do not have nuclear weapons ourselves, stuff like that. Having said that, I suppose that there is no way for us to achieve a nuclear weapon without nuclear weapons at any point in the future if we're only having conversations solely on how to reduce the existing number of nuclear weapons. Instead, what we need to be doing right now is to start and continue a conversation on how to make a scenario, world, where individuals like us all, and also the individual world leaders that have an access to nuclear body are truly convinced that there's, no more need for nuclear weaponry use and ownership. And in order to do that, we simply just need to get rid of, or even get rid of risk of international conflicts, right? So without making such a scenario come true, I personally do not honestly think that even a world without nuclear weapons would be possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the key word was conversation, having conversation with different actors. And, we are always trying to have a conversation with politicians as well. And as I said at the beginning, we are always being attacked that when we speak up about the abolition of nuclear weapons. How are you going to achieve that? Or how on earth that you think that, how to, solve this problem? But the reason for this is that one of the biggest reason for this is the attitude of Japanese government, I guess. As Secretary General made a speech at the TPNW conference, that if leaders in Japan could give a message that let's eliminate nuclear weapons before they eliminate us, then it's the atmosphere in Japan will get much better to achieve the world without nuclear weapons. And I guess yesterday we had a dialogue among the Japanese politicians, and you coordinated that event. And I want to ask how they talk about that and their attitude, because just because when I try to do that, I guess they really don't know how to communicate and listen to our voices. They even do not try to meet and listen to our voices.
Yeah, we actually held the dialogue session with the parliamentarian yesterday, and yeah, through such activities, I feel that as you said, we don't have sufficient mechanisms or maybe sufficient attitude of political leaders to try to listen to the voices of civil society and especially the youth. But in addition to that, even when we had a dialogue with them, I feel that their reactions are always, the same or maybe at least similar, and they just give us, templated answers. I feel, yeah. So in that sense, I think, we need genuine democratization and foreign policy by having candid dialogue with politicians and, world leaders.
Yeah, I think that's really great point. So talking to high representatives and global leaders, sometimes it's challenging for the youth, because this is my personal experience, but since I'm from Hiroshima, I convey the message from Hiroshima and no more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki. but sometimes we are seen, and everyone in this field experienced that we are seen as idealists or dreamers, but we are not. And I was really happy to hear opening remarks from Mr. Guterres today, because he said clearly that the disarmament is an important agenda as non-proliferation. Non-proliferation is important, but also disarmament needs to be taken action. That was really important, significant remark, and it really encouraged us today. Thank you. So going to the next topic, thank you for sharing your challenges. So how do you think the UN and global leaders who are watching right now can help you and help you fight disarmament and also push you forward for working on further activities?
I'm sorry, I guess I talked too much, but I'm just quick. I have two suggestions. The first is to promote and provide more support for nuclear. Not only nuclear, disarmament education. I think for many youth, nuclear weapon issues looks very complicated and difficult to understand, and a lack of knowledge in this field makes it difficult for the youth to express their opinions. So in that sense, it is really crucial to make disarmament education accessible to as many youth as possible, and especially for those who cannot speak English. So for this reason, I'd like to ask for the United Nations or maybe other national governments to provide more support for disarmament education. This is my first proposal. And the second proposal is to host youth-led international conferences on nuclear debate utilizing the privilege of the United Nations. Actually, I participated in the first meeting of the State Party of TPNW, and before that, I joined the ICANN Nuclear Bomb Forum, and that experience was really inspiring for me, and I learned a lot from the other youth members. But at the same time, I heard that some country could not send its individual to this ICANN forum due to financial constraints or maybe political reasons. So in that sense, I would like to suggest that UN or maybe relevant parties to host the youth-led international conferences, or if necessary, financial support for those in need, to help the youth have inspiring exchange with other youth.
Right, I definitely relate to what you just said in terms of making international conferences available and even more accessible for global youth. And going off of that, I do have a concrete proposal, which is to create literally a youth version of the United Nations, period. And in that program, there will be no power disparities, for example, between, let's say, the permanent members of Security Council and those that are not. And I'm totally aware that there are so many different programs already initiated by the UN for global youth. So let me very briefly explain how my proposed idea is going to be different from the existing ones. So the first big difference is that the program needs to be a longitudinal program. At least a year-long program where the first and last month of the program are going to be conducted in person. And the second difference is that the youth, global youth participants will be literally treated and regarded as the representatives of their native national governments. By that I mean, for example, the individual national governments are responsible for selecting the participants themselves and also sending them to the program. And the last difference that I wanted to propose is that we need to make the program completely transparent. By that I mean, for example, the discussion sessions are going to be all live streamed and recorded, so that not only the participants themselves, but also the rest of the world that are not necessarily heavily involved in the program are able to personalize and internalize what is going on and what is being discussed in the program as well. And also, the members of the participants are going to alter every single year so that we can maximize the number of youth like that and literally just fill up this world with very like-minded, bright young leaders that are committed to making a world without any use of armed forces. And they are all connected with a very strong share of interest and personal trust, and most of all, friendship. And I'm very looking forward to making such a thing come true with all of you here, including everybody here. So thank you.
2人が提案してくれたように、その若い人
I was listening to the two proposals for youth. I think these programs are very critical and important, but we need to appeal to the currently available leaders. That's something I want the United Nations to work on. It's very difficult for us to have an opportunity to have the dialogues with the politicians, but United Nations, if they are able to lead us as the intermediary and also to bring our voices to them, and Governor Yuzaki, you are here. Hiroshima is the place to disseminate the peace activities, and I hope you need to take the very active role. Climate change is another issue, and there is a threat that nuclear weapons might be utilized once again, and we need to come up with the climate change measures. By 2030, GHG has to be reduced more than 60% in Japan. But current target is 46%. In Hiroshima Prefecture, it is only 22%, quite less aggressive in comparison with the target of GHG reduction. So when we talk about the peace, poverty, and gender issues have to be also solved, and we need to take the leadership to appeal from Hiroshima to the world.
Climate change is so crucial problem for us, and I want to solve that problem as soon as possible, and because we can eliminate nuclear weapons by ourselves, right? So as soon as possible, if we could use those money which are used in army to the climate change, then I guess we can maybe solve this problem much earlier. And the thing I want to say is that this is more suggestion than request. But as Asano-san mentioned, when I went to Vienna, I joined ICAN Nuclear Ban Forum, and that was so cool. People who gathered there were all activists and talking maybe sometimes difficult things, but they were so attractive, talking those issues having with alcohol and sweets on their hands. I've never seen these kind of events in Japan. It's too serious thing to talk. But if that continues, no one gonna come in to this field. So I really wanted to have that event in Japan. So I want to figure out how we can cooperate to each other to have that event. Yeah, very.
Yeah, I was looking at all of you posting on social media from the conference, I'm so jealous I'm not there. It looked so cool. But yeah, I think what Suzuka's talking about, this hype, this cool factor, is really important for attracting youth to a cause. And so my proposal to everyone here is that I would love if all the global leaders watching would consider increasing partnerships with the entertainment sector. So pop culture is a really amazing way to attract young people to a cause, even to nuclear weapons or to global issues. And the UN is already an amazing leader in this field. The UNDP has created apps, phone mobile games to educate millions of people around the world. UNESCO actually partnered with Minecraft. I don't know how many of you people play Minecraft in here. And the UN actually partnered with Sony a few years ago to invite leaders in the film and gaming industries to talk about how we can create SDGs through entertainment. And so I think this is extremely amazing, and I think it would be great if we could even take it to the next level. Like Yuzaki-san, what if Hiroshima had an esports team that was thinking about how we could connect peace and entertainment? Or what if the United Nations had a specific division dedicated to combining the entertainment sector with the SDGs realization and all of these things? So I guess I'm really hoping to go this direction in my career personally, connecting entertainment, pop culture, and peace. And so I would be really thrilled if any of you would want to discuss that more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all the fruitful discussions, and really, I'm excited to, to hear more about it. We can discuss it later. And yeah, so one thing I thought it was important was that everyone thinks the challenge is that we are lacking more people, we are lacking interest in this field because nuclear disarmament is such a difficult topic to tackle on, and nobody thinks, not nobody, but a lot of people think it's not an imminent threat. So our mission is to make this field more accessible, inclusive, and also cool and catchy. And I think we are ready to make a change in this field. So as a wrap up, so we, as a youth from Hiroshima, we listened to survivors' testimonies a lot, and we spent a lot of time with them, and we have witnessed how they have changed their hatred and tragic memory and experience into the power of making others happy and into power of wishing for a peaceful world. So I would just like to emphasize that we are ready to take a change, and we are ready to push it forward. So I will get it back to Mr. António Guterres for the message for youth, for those who are watching right now.
Well, allow me, first of all, a marginal comment before going into the central issue. The marginal comment is about the war in Ukraine. It was quoted several times. And indeed, the war in Ukraine is being used for two things. One, to say that, well, nuclear disarmament, be careful because of the war in Ukraine. And we need to invest in oil and gas because the prices are too high because of the war in Ukraine. It's exactly the opposite. If there were no nuclear weapons, the war in Ukraine would be much less dangerous. So if there is a good reason that the war of Ukraine demonstrates, is the reason to say, let's abolish nuclear weapons. Because it makes wars like the war in Ukraine much less dangerous than what we have now. And second, if the world had invested massively in the last few decades in renewable energy, now the war in Ukraine would have no impact in relation to the prices of energy. It's because we are excessively dependent on fossil fuels that the war in Ukraine has created the situation it has created. So we need to be able to reverse the argument. The argument, the short-term view of the arguments do not make any sense. It would be like if you are in a hole, you dig more and you go down more. What we need is to cover the hole and change course. And change course is disarmament, change course is sustainability and climate action, but change course is also inclusivity. Now, the central point. The central point is power, and it's power relations. The attitude of political leaders and I would say leaders of international organizations, I can also speak, has been evolving in relation to the youth. When I started my engagement after the revolution in Portugal, politicians would simply not care about young people. So you grow up and then you'll see. Then at a certain moment, because students were creating problems and things of the sort and whatever, political leaders thought, well, we need to talk to these people. And so it was a second relationship based on propaganda. No, I mean, we talk to them, we tell them what to do. Then they discovered that this was not working very well, that people wanted to say something. So we start to create a number of mechanisms for the youth to be able to give their opinion. And then, of course, after the youth would give their opinion, political leaders will do whatever they want. Now we need to move into a fourth stage, which is a stage, like it was said by several of you, of political participation in decision-making processes. And for that, you need to fight, because this will not be given to you. You need to fight for it. And you have allies in the political systems and in the organizations like the UN. You have allies that want to do that. And you need to have a top-down approach, creating institutional mechanisms for the participation of the youth in decision-making processes. For instance, in the UN, our common agenda, we want to make decision-making processes more attentive to the needs of the youth and of the future generations that are not yet born. And we are going to create a youth office exactly with the objective of creating opportunities of participation of young people in the decision-making process of the UN. And the same can apply to governments. A government like the Emirates has created a number of structures in which young people really participate in the decision-making processes. So you need to fight for this top-down approach. And you need to fight from a bottom-up approach. I mean, you are much better than me in handling these devices, no? You can create networks and movements. I mean, if the extreme right can create networks, as we have seen in the American elections, no? With these, the QAnon, you know, QAnon, and, if they can, you also can. And there is no reason why you wouldn't be able to create, launch it from here, a world movement of young people massively active in social media, not only promoting disarmament or whatever, but attacking, and those that are obstacles to disarmament, and the armament factories. Say, what are the profits of the armament producers, no? Like I attacked the oil and gas companies for their profits just, I don't know if you have seen, 3 or 4 days ago. I mean, the same with the armament industry. You know, they're making a lot of money with this. I mean, you can launch campaigns. You need to have, and you need to network. No, it cannot be just this group here. You need to network. There are lots of organizations, but usually the good people is naive. So you need to be tough. Huh? You need to be tough. You need to really organize these campaigns to bite. Huh? And for politicians to, oh my God, if I'm not careful, I might lose the next election. You know? Because that's basically what most politicians think about, is the next election. And this is the main problem of decision-making today, is that all problems are structural, all problems have a long-term perspective, but the next elections are just around the corner. So people will, okay, afterwards but now, so make it clear that this doesn't work. So be very active in using the instruments, especially social media, but in an organized way and in a tough way. I mean, it's not only saying nice things, it's also going after those that are misbehaving, because that will make things shake. And at the same time, use as much as possible the UN, and we are ready to help on that, use as much as possible the UN to organize things that can help, namely in relation to education and to other aspects. As I have 10 seconds left, I end by saying that I was delighted to be with all of you today, and go for it. And
Thank you very much for your words. I was very inspired by your statement that you mentioned that the strength of the youth is the network and partnership, and I believe we can make that happen and make it possible. And before we move on to the closing remarks, we would like to hear a few words from our governor, Mr. Izaki, reflecting on today's event.
こっち向いて。はい。皆さん、今日はどうもありがとうございました。日本語でいいのかな？うん。はい。
Am I supposed to speak in Japanese? Oh, yes. Be it the parents or the adults, For our eyes, the children are the ones who create the problems. Seems to me our generations are creating the problems, and the problems are not succeeded to the young generations, according to SG. Now, amongst the young people, they are very much conscious and aware of the issues. And as an adult, as the person who hand over the problem to the next generation, I was very much encouraged, and I felt the power of the young people. And the way you spoke was quite different. And somebody talked about the entertainment. Your senses are so new. Looks like you are the ones who are able to shape up the next stage. We hope we will be able to learn from you, and we will be able to put it into our practice and make it as a big movement. In Hiroshima Prefecture, we do have a lot of programs up to the level of high school students and also university students, but after that, not many programs for peace available in Hiroshima. But be it Hiroshima Prefecture or United Nations, in many of those organizations, there is the demand for the youth power. You will be able to find a job in those places. Your thoughts can be proposed and to put it in practice, and then we will be able to change the society. Please do not hesitate. There's always a job for you, a lot of jobs. It's okay you stay in the NGO, or in order to make the change in the established organization, probably you can come into those organizations and make the transformation. Let's go for it and create a new society and new world. Thank you very much for joining.
Great words and full of wisdom to end on it. And I would like to thank all the members for being in this panel. I perceived that it was a great conversation, helped visualize youth what they are thinking at present. And I was very encouraged and inspired, and I hope you all did too.
So just a quick information for a lot of youth who are watching right now. UNITAR is also planning to, so this is not the end, and we are planning to have another session on September 21st on International Day of Peace, gathering a lot of young activists around the world working on this SDGs issue, social issues, social justice. So please stay tuned, and thank you. I would like to say that we are ready to finish what activists and Hibakusha have started, as it was in the remarks of this morning's Mr. Guterres. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So this is the end of the event, and then now we would like to move to the photo session. So